I can't do this anymore. 5 words that shattered the calm of a live TV broadcast like a sudden earthquake. A veteran talk show host had just thrown in the towel, leaving a nation stunned. What could have pushed them to this breaking point? It began as a typical political debate, but when Karoline Leavitt stepped onto the set, everything changed. Armed with unwavering resolve and an arsenal of facts, she ignited a firestorm. We'll take you inside the interview that rewrote the rules of political discourse and left a studio audience speechless. Karoline Leavitt stepped onto the set of The Daily Discourse, one of the nation's most watched liberal talk shows. The host, Marcus Brennan, greeted her with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. Leavitt had prepared extensively for this moment, but nothing could have prepared her for what was about to unfold. The interview began with standard questions about Leavitt's political views and her rapid rise within the Republican Party. She answered each query with poise, her responses well-crafted and backed by facts. But as the minutes ticked by, a shift in the atmosphere became palpable. Brennan's tone grew sharper, his questions more pointed. "Miss Leavitt, you've been vocal about your support for stricter immigration policies," Brennan said, his voice taking on an edge. "How do you reconcile that with the fact that your own grandparents were immigrants?" Leavitt took a deep breath. "My grandparents came to this country legally, worked hard, and embraced the American dream," she replied, her voice steady. "I believe in preserving those opportunities for future generations through a fair and regulated immigration system." Brennan's face tightened, clearly unsatisfied with her response. He pressed on, his questions becoming increasingly personal and inflammatory. "Some have called you a puppet for far-right ideologies," Brennan said, his voice dripping with disdain. "How do you respond to accusations that you're nothing more than a pretty face spouting rehearsed talking points?" A collective gasp rippled through the studio. This wasn't journalism anymore. It was a public ambush. Leavitt felt a surge of anger, but she refused to let it show. Instead, she straightened her spine and met Brennan's gaze head-on. "Mr. Brennan," Leavitt began, her voice calm but carrying an undercurrent of steel, "I came here to discuss ideas, not trade insults. Let's focus on the issues that matter to the American people, shall we?" The studio fell silent. Brennan's face flushed red, caught off guard by Leavitt's professional response. He had clearly expected an emotional outburst. Instead, he found himself face-to-face with a composed young woman who refused to stoop to his level. For a moment, Brennan seemed at a loss for words. The tables had turned, and suddenly it was the seasoned host who appeared flustered. He shuffled his notes, his hands visibly shaking now. As Leavitt prepared to field the next question, she couldn't help but feel a mix of emotions. Anger at the unfair treatment, pride in her ability to stay calm, and a growing realization that this interview was about to become something much bigger than she had anticipated. Little did she know, the real fireworks were yet to come. The confrontation that would shock the nation and change the landscape of political discourse was building to a crescendo. The tension in the studio was palpable as Marcus Brennan leaned forward, his eyes glinting with barely concealed contempt. Karoline Leavitt felt a surge of determination course through her veins. This wasn't just an interview anymore. It was a battle for truth, and she was ready. "Let's talk about your real agenda, Miss Leavitt," Brennan said, his voice dripping with disdain. "Isn't it true that you're nothing more than a puppet for extreme right-wing ideologies?" The studio audience gasped, shocked by the host's blatant hostility. But Leavitt didn't flinch. She had faced this kind of attack before, and she was prepared. "Mr. Brennan," Leavitt replied, her voice steady and controlled, "I'm here to discuss facts and policies, not engage in baseless accusations. Let's address your concerns one by one." With deliberate movements, Leavitt reached into her folder and pulled out a stack of papers. The rustling sound echoed through the suddenly silent studio. "You've accused me of being a puppet for extreme ideologies," Leavitt began, her eyes locked on Brennan's. "But let's look at the facts. During my time at St. Anselm College, I wrote extensively about policies I believed would benefit America. For example, I supported President Trump's travel ban because I believed it was necessary for national security and public safety." Brennan tried to interrupt, but Leavitt pressed on. She addressed criticisms of her campaign style, citing the New York Times observation that their primary election focused more on tone than policy differences. As Leavitt continued to present fact after fact, Brennan's interruptions became more frequent and flustered. He seemed unprepared for this level of factual rebuttal. "What about climate change?" Brennan demanded, his voice rising. "How can you defend conservative inaction on such a critical issue?" Leavitt didn't miss a beat. Again, Mr. Brennan, you're making assumptions without looking at the full picture. Many conservatives, myself included, believe that market-driven solutions can be more effective than government intervention in addressing environmental issues. This isn't about denying the problem. It's about finding the most efficient and effective solutions. The host's frustration was evident as he struggled to find a line of attack that Leavitt couldn't counter with hard data. The tables had turned, and now it was Brennan who seemed unprepared and off balance. Leavitt's voice remained steady, but her words cut through Brennan's arguments like a hot knife through butter. Mr. Brennan, I came here prepared to have a substantive discussion about policies and their impacts. I've presented you with facts, data, and reasoned arguments. These aren't talking points or extremist propaganda. They're the result of careful research and analysis. She paused, her gaze unwavering. Do you have any actual questions about the information I've presented? Or would you prefer to continue with baseless accusations? The studio fell silent. Brennan's mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. He shuffled his papers, clearly searching for a response that wouldn't come. In that moment, it was clear to everyone watching, in the studio and at home, that something unprecedented had happened. A young conservative politician had not only stood her ground against a veteran liberal host, but had systematically dismantled his arguments with facts and poise. Marcus Brennan's face contorted with unbridled anger. "You're nothing but a pretty face parroting lies," he spat, his voice dripping with contempt. The studio fell silent. This wasn't just another political disagreement. It was a blatantly sexist attack on national television. How would Karoline Leavitt respond? Would she lose her cool and give Brennan the emotional outburst he was clearly trying to provoke? But Leavitt didn't take the bait. Her eyes flashed with determination as she leaned forward, her voice low and controlled. "Mr. Brennan," she began, "I find it deeply disappointing that you would resort to such a sexist remark. Let me remind you of something you seem to have forgotten." Leavitt launched into a powerful recounting of her achievements. "I graduated from St. Anselm College in 2019 with a bachelor's degree in communications and politics. I'm the first in my immediate family to earn a college degree. During my time there, I founded the first broadcasting club at the college and wrote extensively about policies I believed would benefit America." Brennan tried to interrupt, but Leavitt silenced him with a gesture. The tension in the studio was palpable. "You see, Mr. Brennan, comments like yours are unfortunately all too common for women in politics. Female politicians are 30% more likely to be criticized for their appearance in media coverage than their male counterparts. It's a tactic used to undermine our qualifications and capabilities." Her voice grew stronger with each word. "But I'm not here to discuss my appearance. I'm here to debate ideas and policies. So I challenge you, Mr. Brennan. Pick any policy issue, any at all. Let's have a substantive debate right here, right now." The audience held its collective breath. Brennan's face cycled through a range of emotions: anger, confusion, and finally, a flicker of fear. He opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. Seizing the moment, Leavitt delivered her final blow. "My face may be pretty, Mr. Brennan, but it's my mind you should be worried about." The studio erupted in applause. Brennan's attempts to regain control were drowned out by the crowd's reaction. In that moment, the balance of power had shifted irrevocably. As the applause died down, the atmosphere in the studio had transformed. What started as a routine political interview had become a watershed moment in the ongoing struggle against sexism in politics and media. Leavitt's response was a rallying cry for every woman who had ever been dismissed based on her appearance. She had turned a sexist attack into a powerful statement about substance over superficiality, about the importance of ideas over image. The impact of this exchange would reverberate far beyond the studio walls. In the age of social media and viral videos, Leavitt's takedown of Brennan was destined to be seen by millions, sparking conversations across the country about the treatment of women in politics and the media's role in perpetuating harmful stereotypes. As the dust settled and the gravity of what had just transpired began to sink in, a new tension filled the air. How would Brennan respond? Would he double down on his attack or attempt to backpedal? And how would this moment change the trajectory of both their careers? The studio fell silent, but the calm was deceptive. Marcus Brennan's face had turned an alarming shade of red, his hands trembling as he reached for his microphone. The audience held their breath, sensing something unprecedented was about to unfold. "That's it. I'm done. I can't do this anymore," Brennan announced, his voice cracking with emotion. Karoline Leavitt, bracing for another round of debate, froze in place, her expression flickering between surprise and concern. Brennan stood abruptly, his movements erratic. Crew members exchanged worried glances, unsure how to handle this turn of events. What happened next would send shockwaves through the studio and beyond. "For years I've been forced to push their agenda," he shouted, gesturing wildly. "Every night I spoon-feed the public whatever narrative they want us to believe, but I can't do it anymore. I won't be their puppet." The revelation stunned everyone. Leavitt, prepared for a battle of ideas, now witnessed a different fight, one man's struggle against a perceived corrupt system. She remained still, eyes fixed on Brennan's meltdown. Crew members rushed to calm him, but their efforts fueled his anger. He pushed them away, naming executives and exposing alleged cover-ups and practices of manipulation within the network. Leavitt found herself in an unprecedented position, witnessing the implosion of the media structure she had been fighting against. The atmosphere grew thick with tension. Brennan turned to face the camera, his eyes wild with fear and determination. What he said next would change the landscape of political discourse in America. "I quit. Live on air. You can't silence the truth anymore," he declared. With those words, Marcus Brennan, the face of the daily discourse for over a decade, stormed off the set. He left behind a stunned silence. The cameras captured Leavitt motionless, her face a canvas of conflicting emotions. The audience sat in shocked silence. Even seasoned producers seemed paralyzed, unable to cut to commercial. For long moments, only the faint hum of equipment could be heard. The live feed broadcast this tableau of confusion to millions of homes across the nation. As reality sank in, new tensions arose. How would the network respond to this defiance? What repercussions would Brennan face? Most importantly, how would this moment change public perception of media integrity and political narratives? The studio erupted into chaos, but Karoline Leavitt remained a pillar of calm amidst the storm. As producers frantically signaled to cut the feed, she sat motionless, her composure a stark contrast to the mayhem unfolding around her. In that moment, she had no idea that her unwavering poise would soon catapult her into a new stratosphere of public attention. Outside the studio walls, a digital wildfire was about to ignite. Within minutes, clips of the explosive interview began spreading across social media platforms like wildfire. Millions of users shared, commented, and debated the merits of what they had just witnessed. The incident was no longer confined to a single network or time slot. It had become a global phenomenon. News outlets, caught off guard by the sudden turn of events, scrambled to cover the story. Anchors and pundits dissected every moment of the interview, analyzing Leavitt's responses and Brennan's shocking resignation. The 24-hour news cycle had found its new obsession, and Karoline Leavitt was at the center of it all. As the world reacted, Leavitt's phone buzzed incessantly. Calls poured in from other networks, eager to secure an exclusive interview. Supporters reached out in droves, praising her composure and articulate defense of her beliefs. But with the spotlight came scrutiny, and not everyone was impressed by the young conservative's performance. The host's resignation became a national talking point, sparking heated debates about media bias, cancel culture, and journalistic integrity in America. Social media platforms became battlegrounds where supporters and critics clashed, each side convinced of their own righteousness. Leavitt found herself in the eye of the storm, simultaneously lauded and vilified. Supporters hailed her as a champion of conservative values, praising her ability to stand firm against perceived liberal media bias. Critics accused her of contributing to the further polarization of political discourse. As the dust began to settle, a new opportunity emerged. A rival network, impressed by Leavitt's grace under pressure, approached her with an offer. They wanted to give her her own show, a platform to share her views without fear of hostile interviewers or biased editing. The incident had become more than just a viral video or a career-defining moment for Leavitt. It had evolved into a watershed moment in the ongoing discussion of media accountability. Questions swirled about the responsibilities of journalists, the role of objectivity in reporting, and the influence of personal biases on news coverage. For Leavitt, the aftermath of the interview was a whirlwind of emotions and opportunities. She found herself thrust into a position of influence she had never anticipated, with a chance to shape the narrative around conservative voices in the media. But with that power came responsibility, and she knew that her every move would now be scrutinized more closely than ever before. Karoline Leavitt's stand against media bias became a rallying cry for truth-seekers nationwide. The incident sparked a firestorm of debate, forcing Americans to confront hard questions about media's role in our polarized society. As trust in traditional news outlets wanes, Leavitt's moment of triumph shines as a beacon of authenticity. The viral video exposed more than one host's bias. It cracked open a larger conversation about diverse voices in today's charged landscape. How do we navigate the choppy waters of information overload and partisan spin? The answer lies within each of us. As you scroll through your next news feed, ask yourself, am I seeking truth or confirmation? Your choices shape the media landscape. Will you make your voice count?